Hello, I'm Lynn Thorp, President of Clean Water Action, and thank you for joining our annual member meeting today. We want to take the opportunity to update you about some of our strategies and activities involved in our election work this year. Um, and before we get started, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts about that work and why it's so important to us. Well, first, it's embedded in our mission and in our history. Although I will say in 1972, when Clean Water was first founded, working on elections wasn't part of our portfolio. But I found that I have remembered that making democracy work is in our mission statement from the beginning. We set out to make sure that people power and people's voices were brought to implementing the ambitious Clean Water Act it was soon going to pass, and its programs were aimed at reducing and eventually eliminating water pollution. That's a pretty tall order, and the vision behind our organization was that people were going to need to engage to make sure that they pushed and pushed at every level, local, state, and federal, to get that job done. It didn't take long for our predecessors to figure out that without elected officials in office, starting at the federal level, but also at the state and local level, um, we were going to face challenges in meeting the goals of the Clean Water Act and also the other growing body of environmental issues that we were working on. And we realized that elected officials play a big role in for example, the Clean Water Act's success or in its failure. So we dived in to educate people about the importance of having supporters and indeed champions in office. And we haven't stopped since, and we're still at it. But second, we are used to hearing these last years that every election year is the most important ever. I'm sure you've heard that. Um, but I have to tell you, it's definitely true now. Here in my hometown in Washington, D.C., the combination of the Trump administration and the majority in the U.S. Congress, they're the most hostile to environmental and health protections that we've ever experienced. And the rollbacks and the attacks, the program cuts, funding cuts, chaos are relentless. But I do think we can change that. I think it is possible to do more to eliminate water and air pollution. I know that we can get toxic chemicals out of our environment, out of our drinking water, out of our bodies, and that we can promote cleaner energy and tackle climate change. Can we protect wildlife and this planet, also known as our life support system? Yes, I think we can, but it does start with who's in office so that we can make progress instead of moving backwards. So I'm hoping that tonight's panel discussion among some of the leaders of our election projects will inspire you and make you as proud of Clean Water's work as I am. We couldn't do all this without our members, and we're grateful to spend time with you today. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Cindy Lupi, our Senior Director for State Policy and Program.
Thank you, Lynn. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you virtually tonight. And I want to flag for those of you who may not know that Lynn Thorp is our newly appointed president. And we in the entire movement appreciate her leadership so much during these critical times. We're thrilled to share with you this dynamic panel of on-the-ground leaders with amazing insight and perspective with this panel discussion that we're about to launch about our election strategy and how we're working to strengthen democracy in real time. Our format will start out with some specific questions for individual panelists, and then we'll open it up to more general questions and any questions you, as our members, may have. I want to ask you to be thinking about questions right now that you might want to drop in the Q&A section. And note who the question is for if you have any thoughts on that. Um, would really like to hear what your questions are and what you're thinking about, what you'd like more information about. That's why we're here tonight. So let's get started with the introduction of the panelists, which is a complete joy for me. I get to work with all of these folks who lead amazing organizing and outreach and elections work on the ground in different locations across the country. So I'm going to introduce them alphabetically. We'll start out with Avonna Starck, who is our Minnesota Director for Clean Water Action. She's also a Fridley School Board member, and she has over 2 decades experience in politics in a variety of different ways. Next, we have Emily Woodcock, who is our interim Michigan director and Canvas director, and she's got over 20 years of amazing experience with clean water specifically. Mare Carbone is the next panelist I want to flag for you. He is the regional Canvas supervisor for the western part of the country, and he's got over 20 years of experience in that work, really mobilizing people around dynamic outreach programs and getting amazing results. Finally, we have Myron Arnowitt, who is our Pennsylvania director. He's been the director since 2007, and he's got over 25 additional years of experience as a community organizer for a variety of environmental and social justice organizations. Okay, well, that's the panel, and welcome and thank you to all the panelists. We're ready to dive right in to some specific questions. So I am going to start out with Emily Woodcock. Emily, Michigan is working on an important ballot initiative right now that would restrict corporate dollars in elections. What would this initiative accomplish, and how would it affect issues like polluter pay policies that are pending in Michigan right now?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the initiative is called Michiganders for Money Out of Politics. It is a statewide ballot proposal, and it's a legislative initiative, so it would pass a law. And what it does is a couple of things. So in Michigan, our largest political donors are our two monopoly energy utilities, DTE and Consumers Energy. And our third, DTE is number one, Consumers is number three. And then in between those two is Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is the healthcare provider for most of the government agencies in Michigan. So those three companies contribute huge amounts of money to lawmakers every year. Only 10 of our 148 state legislators did not take money from these companies the last election cycle that we have data for. So it's a widespread issue. And because of that, Michiganders pay the highest utility rates in the country, in the Midwest, sorry, and have the lowest reliability in the Midwest. It is not uncommon to have several weeks of power outages after an ice storm or something like that. So what this initiative does is make it illegal for these monopoly utilities and any corporation with over $250,000 in government contracts to make any kind of political donation. So it would ban companies making those political donations, their PACs for making political donations, and their C-suite, so CEOs, CFOs, from making donations as well. We estimate that will remove about 70 to 90% of dark money out of the political process in Michigan. So this is really system changing. And you asked about polluter pay. So for folks outside of Michigan, what polluter pay is in Michigan, we don't really hold polluters accountable. Don't have a great structure for that. So most of the time, if a big company, say, causes a spill or some kind of, dumping of a chemical or something like that, we wind up paying for that cleanup with our tax dollars. There's not a great structure in place to hold those companies accountable. Clean Water has been working on passing stronger polluter pay laws for 6+ years now, maybe longer. And they're consistently blocked because these big companies have purchased essentially a seat at the decision-making table. When DTE donates to all of these lawmakers, what happens is lawmakers wind up running their legislation by these companies and not wanting to pass something that the companies don't agree with. And as a result, we don't hold polluters accountable. There are a lot of other examples of things that we haven't been able to do for the same reason. But yeah, polluter pay is a really perfect one. I think I answered all
You
of your questions there.
did.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have just one follow-up question. This sounds like a very significant strategic goal. Do you
Yes.
think that this proposal in Michigan
Hmm.
before voters and legislators, do you think it's similar to the recent Hawaii legislation that so much of us have heard about, so many of us have heard about, that strips corporation of the legal power to spend money on elections at the state level in Hawaii?
Yeah, so that is really exciting legislation, and it did pass and was signed by the governor just recently. There are some differences. The Hawaii legislation essentially defines what entities that aren't people get to do in Hawaii. And one of those definitions is that they aren't able to make donations. So it's great. It's really strong. Some differences, though, we are putting this up to the voters. We did attempt to pass this as legislation last legislative cycle, and unfortunately, our lawmakers just weren't ready to to bite the hand that feeds them. So we said, okay, we'll take it to the people. But another thing that our legislation does is close what's called the dark money loophole. So that when you see ads and it's like it's clearly about a candidate, but it's issue based and it's by someone like the Americans for centralized something or things like that have these sort of murky names. That's dark money because you don't know who that is, who their donors are, who they truly represent. This would now force those entities to publicize their donors. So it takes it a step further than some of the laws like what Hawaii did. But it's amazing to see that pass in the state of Hawaii. And from what I've read, I think they were pretty careful to write.
Excellent. Excellent.
Did want to
Well,
flag that Jen, our
yeah.
comms director, has put some really helpful links and info in the chat for folks if you want to check out more.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Team Michigan. This
Yeah.
is this is a this is a hugely exciting initiative, and we all know that democracy thrives in the daylight. So amazing, amazing work, y'all. Okay, our next question I'm going to ask of Avonna Starck. Avonna, Minnesota has been in the news for much of the last year with a focus on protecting democracy and civil rights, especially during the ICE occupation this past winter. How has the neighbor to neighbor approach strengthened the community and our ability to protect safeguards like efforts that protect clean water and our health, such as Amara's Law?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's one really important thing to point out is that we still have ICE here in the community and they are still doing what they've been doing. It just isn't getting as much attention. So we have this really wonderful network that we've created through things like signal chats, Facebook groups, texting, and we've gotten to know our neighbors. So when we're at the park now, we know the people that our kids are playing with. We have, at least in my little community, now have monthly meetups at a coffee shop that's locally owned, and they open up just for us. And that's really given us the opportunity to talk about other things as well. So we'll hop into these signal chats and say, hey, unrelated to the ice occupation, but have you heard XYZ is happening, or that sort of thing. We've actually been able to use this infrastructure now to recruit candidates to unseat the city council members and other elected officials who empathized and supported ICE and didn't do anything to protect our community. So, I was just at the park with my 4-year-old the other day, and I ran into another mom, and we had worked to the same corner, watching for the kiddos to get to and from school. So we had built a relationship that way, and we were able to strike up a conversation. So it really broke down those barriers. And there are cars that I recognize now, from doing patrols and things like that. So it's been really nice. We just had um, some testing done in our local water, and we had some really disturbing results, and it gave me the opportunity to reach out to people, and they knew who I was, and we had built that relationship. So, the silver lining is we have this really horrible occupation that is hurting a lot of our neighbors, but it's also made us stronger, and we're working on figuring out who needs help to go vote, who wants to run for office, who do we need to go door knock for, who can we give money to make sure that our city council and our state legislature and even our federal level delegation really reflects our morals and our values, not just for how we care about our neighbors, but also now how we care about our environment.
Excellent. Well, a big, huge hat off to all of the Minnesota leaders who are working to shine a light on democracy and protections that are community-based for water and for health and for engaging in the election cycle with that as a core motivator. So thanks for sharing that, Avonna, so much. This is actually a great time for me to flag that this work runs on grassroots donations. And for those of you who are watching and inspired by some of the stories you're hearing, I'm going to urge you to get involved as a donor if you aren't already, and to donate again if you already have, because this is the most critical time for us to be building this outreach and affecting the election that comes in the fall. So more information will be shared in the chat alongside some of the information from Jen so far. So look for those ways to donate, and we'll keep going with Mare. Mare, I want to ask you a question as a former canvasser myself. You have a long track record of successfully building outreach teams that can mean the difference. You can point to those times when it meant the difference between a pro-environment, pro-clean water candidate winning and losing ultimately on election day. How do you keep the team motivated? And, what are some of the most impactful stories about our teams meeting people for the first time who then become really involved in the democratic process?
Oh wow, that's a great question, Cindy. I think the main thing, these folks are really at the front lines, whether it's our field organizers or our phone outreach. And a big key of keeping them motivated is just making sure that they understand the importance of the work that they're doing. And I always have told them that, if we were to define grassroots organizing, you're it, you're taking the message to communities, to individuals, to people in different states across the country, and informing them on stuff that's not going to be in the news. It's not going to be easy, access to this stuff. And having them, act on it, and with a call to action, backing it up with funding it, whatever angle it is, and in just coming at it from as many angles as possible in conveying that message to them. Because there's rejection in that job. When folks go out into the field, we'd love for everybody to say, yeah, come on in, but not everybody does. And so, you have to be okay with the fact that there's going to be rejection. There's, going to be moments where you're not going to be, folks aren't going to have the time or what have you to be able to, hear what you have to say. And so you got to keep your spirits up and your focus and just kind of, persist forward. So I think that's the big thing is just really kind of, making sure, like I said, that they understand the importance of the work and that it's, the moments that they have, the one-on-ones, and it's the accumulative impact of that over time with the numbers of people that we have had over the years going out door to door and talking to folks in neighborhoods or making calls and updating folks on the campaigns that we're working on. And I think also, is just really keeping them connected to the campaigns. And we have an amazing program staff across the country for Clean Water Action, and having them hear firsthand about the work that's being done behind the scenes to achieve these goals and win on our campaigns and elections. It's very motivating for people. And, many times they'll be, somebody will be working in, say, Minneapolis, but then they'll hear about the network of clean water action that expands throughout the country. And it's motivating. They care about things that are happening in states that aren't their own. So I think that's a key piece there. And then, the stories of, where people become involved in the democratic process. I mean, we get a wide range of folks that come in and work as field organizers and phone outreach. And, um, we also get a large population of younger folks that come in where this is their first exposure to working in a nonprofit and seeing this work being done. And one of the most satisfying things that I get to see in supervising this is seeing folks come in, within their first month and then seeing that development over the year and years. And some folks stay with us and they elevate their roles. That was me. I came in to supplement my income 30 years ago, working 3 days a week, right? No, not knowing that 30 years later I'd be still doing this work, and that's wonderful. So some stay, and then some, move on to other organizations or types of work. And hearing from folks come back and saying, the skills that I learned when I worked with you folks, I wouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing right now if I hadn't started working with you folks. And those jobs range from being the development director at the LA Ballet to running for office, in local, statewide elections. To being the head of the EPA at one point, way back when in the Clinton years. So again, there's many, many stories. And so definitely know, that the folks that are coming out to your door, the people that are making those phone calls, they're, show them the love when they do come by because they're putting a lot of great work into their portfolio of working with Clean Water Action and really, really make the needle move when it comes to working on our campaigns and elections.
Wow. That that really moves me. I don't know about the rest of you, but thinking about hope for the future and people joining as members, people joining as outreach team folks and learning how to have an impact together. I think so much is moving forward this year that is really based on building this community and building these relationships so that we can hang in there when the going gets tough. Because we're, as Lynn Thorp mentioned, we're really seeing some challenging times with real rollbacks to critical safeguards to the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, safeguards against toxic chemicals that can cause cancer and other health impacts that do not belong in our communities to start with. So there's a lot at stake here, and I want to flag that unfortunately we're having some technical difficulties right now bringing Myron in from Pittsburgh. Oh wait, all I had to do was say Myron, and magically his name appeared on our little Brady Brunch Zoom screen in front of us. So, Myron, a warm welcome, and thank you for persisting in getting in to join us. I think maybe he's still joining us. Can you hear me, Myron? Doesn't sound like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift us, while Myron's getting situated, I'm going to shift us to a general question. Thank you already to some of our members for sending in these questions. Here's one that I really like. What are the most motivating elements of this campaign work that keeps your team moving forward? I'm going to start out and ask Emily Woodcock that question, and then I'll invite other panelists to join in and share their thoughts. And I also want to give a special shout out to Colron Chambers, who is here as our newly elected Clean Water Action Board chair. And yeah, I'd be really interested in anyone's perspective on this question. But starting out with you, Emily Woodcock.
Yeah. Thanks for picking me first. I was excited to answer that question. So yeah, thinking about kind of what keeps folks motivated about the campaign, or just campaign work in general. So I would say generally, what I think most of us who've been doing this for a long time, what keeps us here is, one, we are the sorts of folks who would be concerned about these things anyway. And so having the privilege of being able to do this as a job, is just amazing. I am so grateful that, the majority of my career has been spent doing this kind of work. Um, because otherwise I would probably just be really stressed out about everything. But instead I get to feel like I'm making change on a regular basis. Um, and that is definitely something that kept my team, super motivated through this ballot initiative. I moved into this role as the interim director about 5 weeks ago. So up until then, I was the canvas director, and our canvas spent the entire winter getting petition signatures for the ballot proposal I was talking about earlier. And I think for all of us, looking at everything that was happening across the country, and then being able to talk to folks about this initiative that will literally change the system in Michigan, like, open up the ability for us to do so much of the work that we've been unable to do previously. Just it was like a balm, getting to do this amazing thing while everything else is, chaos around us. So yeah, that felt really good. And a lot of the folks that we talked to at the door about it felt the same, that they were so grateful that there was something concrete that they could do to help out. And I would say that's the second thing that keeps us all motivated, is just the fact that so much of our work is directly empowering regular folks, giving them a voice in these campaigns, helping them recognize that there's actually something that they can do about these things they're concerned about, that will never get old.
Oh, thank you, Emily. Others, do you have additional thoughts you want to share, or should we shift to Myron, who persisted in getting here all the way from Pittsburgh? Good job, Myron. All right, Myron, let's welcome, and let's shift to a question that has Pennsylvania roots for you. Pennsylvania is considered to be a purple state. So I say that in quotes, because it has a broad mix of voter attitudes. How do your education and mobilization efforts play out on the ground? And what are some of the key goals for this year's election cycle? What kind of issues are you hearing about in your state that voters are really concerned about? I think you are still on mute.
Sorry, I have unmuted.
Great.
There we go.
Welcome, Myron.
So just thinking about Pennsylvania, it definitely, remains a pretty purple state, and fairly, everything's everything's a battleground here. I think that when you look at the last election, you look at the U.S. House races that happened in Pennsylvania, Republicans won 3 of those districts by a combined margin of only 15,000 votes. And those are districts that we know we can make a difference in this time around. Pennsylvania is one of the few states that has divided government. And we also have a state Supreme Court that has done some excellent rulings against gerrymandering. So Pennsylvania remains like one of the last states that doesn't have completely gerrymandered districts. And as a result, competitiveness is pretty strong here. We're really seeing issues. We're seeing issues like data centers, which are impacting many communities throughout the state. There are 40, 50, maybe more proposals on the table that are going forward. And the opposition to this is really not partisan based at all. It's community based. And that's something which we really, are cherishing seeing here, because it's something which we've worked at that level for many years. And it's going to make a big difference in how people approach this election. We're also seeing real change at the state level on how we are looking at dealing with PFAS forever chemicals with our state legislature, by wide margins approving several PFAS bills to ban it from firefighting foam. We've worked closely with the Firefighters Association here in Pennsylvania on that issue, as well as also in consumer products. And we're seeing this again, like it's not a partisan issue. A lot of Republicans, for various reasons, have come around to support this critical issue. And we see this as a real sign that actual change is going on, and that when we mobilize voters, and we're looking at focusing on especially 2 U.S. House races here this year in the Lehigh Valley and in the Harrisburg area, that there's going to be, significant impact compared to previous elections.
That's great to hear, Myron. And I'm really glad you brought up the issues related to PFAS and data centers, because we're hearing from our members and grassroots leaders across the country that they share a lot of these concerns. So I would like to open it up to the panel, maybe starting with Avonna. Avonna, what do you see as some of the local issues that are driving community leaders to get involved? And are there any leaders, either in the political space or in grassroots community spaces, that are particularly inspiring you personally?
Yeah, data centers are huge. We have very, very large facilities that are trying to come in across the state. We've worked really hard on bills that would ban NDAs. That's been a big problem, is the community doesn't even know what's being built until it's too late. We've
Quick
also worked on,
question. Can you share what an NDA is for folks
yes,
who haven't heard
a
that
non
acronym?
a non-disclosure agreement. So Meta in particular, Google, they're coming in and they are encouraging city council members to sign these NDAs, so the city council members aren't able to speak to the community about what they're actually approving to be built. We are working really closely with other environmental partners on various lawsuits and such. And the big question around our moratorium bill, the reason that we're pushing for a moratorium is we're saying we want a moratorium until you can answer questions, until you can tell us what chemicals you're using, until you can tell us how much water you're using. They don't have any obligation to tell the community anything. And we've really seen legislators and city council members from across the political spectrum get involved in this. And now that the election is ramping up, I can't get onto social media without a legislator, left, right, center, doesn't matter, talking about how we have to do better. We have to support our infrastructure needs. We have to hold polluters accountable. We're looking at, I just went to the National PFAS conference down in Arizona, and Allie Ling, a PhD researcher from St. Thomas University, sat down and did the math on how much it would cost to tackle the global PFAS crisis. And the wealth does not exist. We do not have the money in any shape or form to tackle the crisis as it currently exists. And so we see legislators for a variety of reasons really waking up and realizing that this is a problem, whether they're worried about their taxpayers, whether they're worried about human health, whether they're worried about environmental quality. And so breaking down these partisan barriers has been really exciting. I just taught a 2-day class at a little college in southern Minnesota, high school seniors and freshmen in college, and just the energy that these kids bring to this and how involved they want to get. And I said, please, please, please make sure you have a plan to vote. And they're so excited to tell me about how they're dragging all their friends and families to the ballot box because they understand now that as young people, they have a voice and it's their world that we're leaving for them. And so I find that really inspiring as well. They are making demands of their legislators and they are not backing down. And it's really, really neat to watch.
Oh, how exciting. I think you all know that Clean Water Action really believes that intergenerational mobilizing is so critical to making sure that we're, leaning on the wisdom of our elders and really building in the exciting new ideas and the particular perspective of young people who will be most impacted by many of the decisions that we make right now. So, thank you for flagging that. And I want to take a moment again to say now, for those of you who are really motivated, hearing how we're on the ground in so many locations doing such amazing pro-democracy work. I want to flag that now would be a great time to donate to support and build our resources so that we can keep making sure that these critical conversations happen and that these connections move forward all the way to the ballot box in November. So we're going to put the link to donate right in the chat. And I'm going to ask one more question that's come in from our members. Thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts with us. I would like to ask, I'm going to ask Lynn Thorp. Have you had good conversations with grassroots leaders or elected officials lately that have been enlightening or have brought a new perspective or new motivation to your work? And if so, what have they been about?
That's a good question. This week I was at a conference and a meeting that had to do with something different than what we're talking about. It had to do with lead service line replacement and drinking water systems. And while there were many people at this water utility conference and public health officials and also NGO advocacy organizations and other more local environmental and other kinds of groups, the thing I thought was interesting is they weren't talking as much about the exact thing they were there to work on, getting the lead out of our drinking water systems, although that's very important. People were talking about how rewarding it is to achieve something together at the local level. And I know that sounds kind of small, but I think it's very important because we talk about these subjects sometime in a very abstract way. Especially for like at the national level, my work in Washington, D.C. on the issue side is often it can be abstract. And so I was impressed by that because I thought about, our own organization and how we're talking to real people at their door or on the phone every day, or we're working in our coalitions to really affect local change. But change, working on the data centers, for example, or change at the state level. So that concrete ability to see something happen is very motivating to people and I think meaningful.
And that's amazing. And I would say that we all share. I think lead is actually one of the best sort of known toxic chemicals. And wow, we all share that incredible motivation to make sure that we prevent exposure to lead in our drinking water where we can.
And
That's
everywhere
exciting.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and everywhere else.
We
That's
were
right.
joined by housing activists who feel that, if I may share, that they'd like to see similar progress. That's a longer one, and we still aren't where we need to be. But then again, they felt hopeful seeing the progress in the water side.
Oh, I love that. Mare, I am really interested in some West Coast perspective on this for all our members out west. Here's your moment. Um, California has been through a big redistricting process and debate, and I'm wondering how you feel about that, how our members feel about that. I know there's lots of questions that get raised. Do you feel like there are new opportunities that have opened up as a result of some of the redistricting changes that have happened in California and in many other places across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it all started in Texas, right? And, I think a lot of us out here wished that we didn't have to go that route. But I think, it is what it is. And I think we all felt that we did have to, because it was happening with other states and to combat that. And yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately in California, we will more than likely gain more up to, I think it was like 3 to 5 new seats for the Democrats or the blue side of the aisle, so to speak. But you don't know, I mean, again, with all this redistricting, even in these red districts or what have you, you don't really know how people are going to vote in the end. They may surprise you. And I think that what I'm hoping is that there's going to be more surprises than we think in the deeper red areas, because of just, the craziness that's gone on with this administration in the just year and a half that it's been in. But I do feel like in California, there's no doubt that we will gain some seats for the Democrats. So, again, there's the sweet side and not so sweet side. We wished we didn't have to go there, but we all felt like, well, this is the route we have to go now. And so Prop 30 did, or Prop 50 definitely did, pass pretty solidly last year.
Terrific. Well, Mayor, thank you so much. I think you're really shining a light on the fact that Clean Water Action is a nonpartisan organization. We are all about a pro-environment, pro-health majority in government at all levels, at the local, at the state, at the national. And I want to give a particular shout out to Becky Smith, who is our Texas director, who just mentioned me and said, yeah, conversations are hopping in Texas. And really proud of the work that our Texas team is doing, looking strategically at new opportunities and new leverage on the ground there. So thank you, Becky, and everyone in Texas who is doing their best to bring a real focus on these core issues that we all come together around: the safety of our communities, the safety of our water, of our air, a livable, healthy, thriving future for, as Avonna likes to say, for our kiddos. Um, I want to also give a particular shout out. I just got word that we have former Mayor Nicole Nesby from Duquesne in Pennsylvania in the house. Mayor, it's so lovely to have you with us. Welcome. I want to just say that we have time for one more question, and that question I'm going to shoot to you, Myron. Myron, uh, how is strategy coming together in Pennsylvania? Like, given how integrated our uh, federal election goals are and our local election goals are. How is that momentum building up in Pennsylvania, and how does the local and the federal election work come together and leverage each other?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about our strategy is that we have this local, state, federal integrated strategy. And I think it's really critical for folks working at the community level to see the different paths connected to change, right? That a lot of the work on PFAS in Pennsylvania started at the local level with people, I mean, tens of thousands of people in the eastern part of the state, not being able to drink their water safely. And just that realization. And now this has moved up to the state level. And we see how that's critical when you have a federal level of government that's really trying to destroy health protection regulation. And so, there are those connections. There's also, I think, this hope with the federal election this year that there can be more change to come, and that it's not just a question of like the partisan side of who's in power, but it's the question of, can we form an anti-Trump majority in Congress next year that can actually stop some of the things that's happening right now. We work with a lot of communities who live right next to this heavy steel industry in the Pittsburgh area. And there were some good regulations that were passed to give the community just a right to know about like what are the carcinogens that are coming out of some of these plants, chemicals like benzene or chromium that are really impacting these communities and the cancer rates there. And the Trump administration put those on hold officially as a step towards working to kill them off. And that's the kind of thing that an active Congress could stop. And those are the kinds of really concrete things that really matter to a local community that I think, do build that hope that we can make some change this year.
Thank you, Myron. It's a great reminder that pollution is really personal. It is about protecting people we love, people in our community, from exposure to things that can make us sick. At the end of the day, that's really the core of what keeps so many of us going. So, well said. Well said, and thank you. I want to give a shout out now to our California team, which is actually having a big event and reception and fundraiser right now as we speak. I don't know if anyone from the California team is here, but just know, Mayor, when you talk to your folks, when you talk to the whole team, please say that we're thinking of them and excited about all that they're accomplishing tonight. All right. I just heard that we have another really exciting guest amongst us. I want to flag that we have John Marion from Rhode Island here with us. He's a core local partner working there on the Voting Rights Act. John, can you give us some perspective on, how critical this work is and an update for all of us?
Sure. Thank you. I'm John Marion. I run the Rhode Island chapter of the group Common Cause here in Rhode Island, and also a Clean Water Action member for many years. Actually scared one of your canvassers once because it was cold New England winter and I invited him into the house for hot chocolate. But yeah, we have been a partner with Clean Water Action for over a decade. We started the state's first permanent voting rights coalition, and one of the charter members was Clean Water Action Rhode Island. And so we've worked with a number of directors over the years. About a year ago, working with Clean Water Action, we decided to pursue a state voting rights act. So many of you are familiar with the fact that there have been attacks on the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, including the recent Supreme Court decision about 2 months ago in Calais. And many states are pursuing state voting rights acts because there's some room still for state legislatures to protect voting rights, particularly of communities of color, in ways that aren't available, that those protections aren't available under federal law anymore because of these decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. So we launched a campaign during our legislative session this year, which concluded a couple of weeks ago, to pursue a Rhode Island Voting Rights Act. We were very successful at raising the profile of the issue. It was a new issue to the state, and Clean Water Action was one of the four groups that was part of the steering committee that did everything from draft the bill to, really run the entire campaign. So Emily Howe deserves all our gratitude, your Rhode Island director. We unfortunately did not pass the bill. We came very close, and we came so close that the legislature felt the need to put out a statement about why the bill wasn't going to pass this year, which is a pretty rare thing for them to do. It means we were able to kind of put a sufficient amount of pressure on them through our activists that they felt they needed to do that. The bill would largely put in place at the state level the protections that once existed under the Federal Voting Rights Act, including prohibitions against racial gerrymandering and vote dilution more broadly, and vote suppression against communities of color. It also had protections for language access that went beyond the Federal Voting Rights Act, as well as some other great protections that aren't in the Federal Voting Rights Act, including protections for a variety of other communities, including the LGBTQ plus community. So we had an ambitious bill. We came very close to passing it with Clean Water Action's help, and we're coming back next year because we think we can win next year.
John, that's amazing. I want to thank you for being such a great partner. And we've had a little focus on East Coast, on West Coast, Great Lakes states, Texas. This is indeed a family and a tapestry that comes together to really work for stronger democracy and for making every vote count. So thank you for being here, and thank you for shouting out Emily Howe and the Rhode Island team. I want to ask if there are any more questions that people have or want to flag, or should we move on to a message from Colron Chambers, our Clean Water Action Board Chair? Okay, well, I want to thank all the panelists, and I hope you all are clapping or showing your appreciation, because this is an inspiring group of people, and I feel so fortunate to be able to work with all of you. I think we all feel that way, both staff and grassroots leaders across the country. Together, we can really get where we need to get. So thank you all for being here. And I guess without further ado, please join me in welcoming Colron Chambers, who is our amazing new elected Clean Water Action Board Chair from New Jersey, from the great state of New Jersey.
Thanks so much, Cindy. And thank you to our dynamic staff and incredible panelists. This has been amazing tonight. I know a lot of hard work went into getting it prepared, and the conversation has been spectacular. But referencing that conversation, when you listen to Emily talk about stripping the corporate dollars out of those Michigan elections, or Avonna break down how neighbors stood together against that ICE occupation, you see exactly who we are. This isn't academic for us. This is the on-the-ground reality. For those that don't know my history with this organization, I didn't start in a boardroom. I started out on the pavement right here in New Jersey, knocking on doors as a canvasser. I've stood on those porches. I know what it feels like to have a door slammed in your face, to have the authorities called on you. And most importantly, I know what it feels like when you connect with a real human who realizes they are not powerless against the systems poisoning their kids' water. That connection is the secret weapon of clean water. Our teams are out there every single day doing the unglamorous spade work of democracy, building real, verifiable public power. Now, look at what Myron is doing in Pennsylvania with the Battleground Alliance, or mayor's work keeping field teams motivated in the face of intense political polarization. That is how power talks to power. Oppressive structures only stand because people cooperate with them. Our job is to organize the non-cooperation. We don't just ask nicely for policy tweaks. We build a grassroots infrastructure to go take the people's power back, plain and simple. But as we all know, you can't play good offense on a weak budget. Miyamoto Musashi, famous samurai, wrote in the Book of Five Rings that to win, you must understand the tool you are using. The tool we need most right now is unrestricted financial muscle. You heard earlier that there's not enough money in the world to solve PFAS, but it's not the only problem we face, and the money will help us set the framework for the fight, as well as help us create ample opportunity to make a difference and slow the spread of PFAS, microplastics, the works. Unrestricted contributions are how we're going to do it, and are what give us our teeth. They're what pay for the office plumbing, the health benefits for our tireless canvassers, and the independence to strike back at corporate polluters wherever they show up, whether that's the West Coast, the East Coast, or in the Midwest. We have a massive strategic plan to expand our field footprint and scale our technical workflows. My dream is that in 50 years, we will have built a global template for what clean water adequacy looks like. And 400 years from now, history will show that this team didn't just slow the bleeding, we wielded our power fearlessly, helped save the earth, and repair the systemic damage of the last few centuries. We can lead what the youth might call hashtag Team Water into the second half of this millennium, but that legacy starts with the investments we make tonight. Click the link in the chat, make a strong contribution to our unrestricted fund, and let's give our staff the weapons they need to go win. Thank you all for joining us. Keep up the fight. Have a great night.